Chapter 15. Zach was making progress. He'd been working on lesson plans for about 2 hours, and was ready for a break. No. A few more minutes, and he'd be to a good breaking point. He could stop for a while, an hour or two, or even a couple days, and not be totally lost when he sat back down. Despite the desire to do something else, he powered through. It might not be what he wanted to do, but it needed to get done, and it would help the time pass faster. He soon lost himself in what he was doing. He was so wrapped up in the details of his lesson and scheduling, that when a knock sounded on the door he jumped. Zach looked up and wondered who had managed to sneak up on him. Pushing his chair back, he stood and went to the door. A peek out the window on his way didn't reveal much, as he couldn't see a vehicle, and there was no one visible through it. Zach opened the door without bothering to use the peephole, and found David Harris standing with his back to the door. "Giving up so quickly?" Zach asked. "No. If you hadn't answered, I'd have gone around back to see if your jet ski was here." David turned his way for a second, then looked back toward the forest that surrounded Zach's cabin on 3 sides. "I thought I heard something." "What kind of something?" It was odd, almost like a scream but not. David shook his head and turned back to Zach. "How you doing, man? I haven't heard from you in a few days, so I thought I'd stop by." Zach stared out at the forest, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. "Come on in." Zach stepped back to let his friend in. "Can I get you something to drink?" he asked once David was inside. He might be a bachelor, but his mother had drilled manners into him. "Nah, I'm good. I didn't come by for a drink, I came to see you." "You want to have a seat in here, or you want to go out where we can look out across the lake?" "Here's fine." Zach waved a hand for David to pick a seat, and went to the table to pick up his cup while he considered telling David about Dani and Mark. David seemed to know that Zach needed time and didn't press while he got his drink and returned to the living room. Zach sat in a chair where he could see David and took a deep breath. "Anything I can help with?" David asked. "I don't know. I don't know if there's anyone who can help me." He stared at David for a moment. David was married with 2 kids, 5 and 3. He might have some insight. "I've had a few surprises this week and I've been a bit overwhelmed. I'm thrilled and so angry I want to hurt someone at the same time." David frowned but stayed quiet. "Did you know Dani's back?" "Dani?" David's frown deepened. "The girl you dated sophomore and junior year? Didn't her family move away in the middle of our senior year?" "Yeah, her dad got a job down in the valley and moved them down there. It's been a long time, but seems like a couple months after she left, you started dating anyone who said yes. I don't know what happened there, but it seemed like one minute you were swearing she was the one and talking about getting married, then almost overnight, you had dated half the volleyball team." "I didn't realize anyone noticed." Zach leaned back and crossed one ankle over his knee. "I ran into her last week, then she called, said we needed to talk." "Oh. How is she doing? Married with 3 kids?" "Not married. Anyway, I met her, she had some interesting things to say." "Oh." Zach told David what Dani had told him, about her father and what he'd done, but not about Mark, not yet. "You believe her?" Zach took a deep breath and thought about the question. "Did he?" "Yeah. He did. She could have come up with a better story if she'd really been the one to break it off with him, and when he added in that she was willing to let him get to know the boy, it was hard to argue with." "I do. It's not just the story, it was the way she reacted and something else." "What?" "It wasn't just me he lied to, and I wasn't the only one he hurt." "What do you mean?" "Dani was pregnant." David's eyebrows shot up. Really? Yeah. She said she wrote me a letter, several actually, and her dad intercepted them. Told her I abandoned her and our son. That I left her to raise him on her own. She kept the baby? She kept him. He's 9 now. You sure he's yours? A half smile formed on his lips as he pulled up one of the pictures his mom had forwarded him from Dani and handed his phone over to David. What do you think? Holy shit. David looked at the screen, then at Zach and back again. I'd say he's yours. That was what I said. He took his phone back and, after a glance at the screen, shut it off and set it down. So why did she come forward now? Zach told his friend all about her father dying and her mom's confession. If he and David hadn't been good friends for the last 20+ years, he might have resented all the questions, but he'd come to rely on David's no-nonsense approach and appreciated his perspective, not just on this but on a lot of things. Wow. David shook his head and sat for a moment, as if trying to absorb the news. You're a daddy. I am. Zach shook his head. I'll admit, it's not something I expected, at least not anytime soon. It was a big thing and he had no doubt finding out he had a son, even one he'd missed out on the first 10 years, was going to change his life. Make it better, he had no doubt.